Okay, cryonics. So imagine we're standing in a room looking through a thick glass into another room that is filled with dozens of stainless steel containers. And inside those, around the inside of those stainless steel containers are bodies. I have to be careful with my terminology here. Legally dead, but according to the company that manages this room, they are patients, and they are preserved. The plan is that when the future technology is perfected, they are revived, brought back to life. This is the basis of cryonics. This is not science fiction. We are in Scottsdale, Arizona at Alcor, which I argue is the leading cryonics organization in the world. There are a number. The bodies are legally dead, but they are alive, according to Alcor. They are patients, and death has been paused. This is not a new concept. Benjamin Franklin speculated about preserving people in suspended states. I've heard stories in the 1960s, hippies put their pets into the freezer locker, but it's not totally a freezing process today. It's a chemical process called vitrification. And cryonics is interesting not only in itself, but it's interesting and important because it's a part of a larger picture related to transhumanism, and specifically super longevity, which is another short video. And cryonics is a stopgap measure for people who think that super longevity technology and therapies are not going to come in time for them. So the leading organization is, in my view, Alcor. And the last time I looked at the website, I think it's $220,000 for a whole body preservation and $80,000 for a neuropreservation in those cylinders. My understanding is the heads, the preserved heads, are around the top. That's a cheaper way to go. And why would someone want to just preserve the head? Well, according to the thinking of cryonics, who we are is preserved it consists of our memories and personality, which is preserved in the brain. And so by the time, and it may be hundreds of years, we develop the technology to revive preserved patients, then we'll also have the technology to, using genetic engineering, molecular nanotechnology, robotics, we'll have the technology to, provide the body that you ideally want, as long as we have who you are preserved in the memory and personality. So cryonics is based on 3 points. One is that the argument is that life can be stopped and restarted if the basic structure is preserved. And cryonics points to a number of examples here. Human embryos are preserved for years. Hypothermic victims can survive for an hour. Large animals can survive for up to, I think, 3 hours with cardiac arrest at low temperatures. The heart is stopped in deep cooling during neurosurgery. So they point to these examples to suggest that life can be stopped and restarted if we preserve the basic structures. Number two, low temperatures and chemical agents, in this case a process called vitrification, can preserve organ structure. And then third, and this is the one that is most controversial and speculative, is that molecular nanotechnology and perhaps other future technologies can do whatever tissue repair is needed when the patients are brought back. Okay, so of course there's lots of skepticism around this, appropriate academic, we could say skepticism. I have a friend who's a very good scholar, very critical scholar, who says, okay, Calvin, when they bring back a mouse or a monkey, you let me know, and I'll maybe sign up. And the CRYONICS member response, it can be something like, do you want to be a member of the control group, or do you want to be a member of the experimental group? Because we certainly know what's going to happen to the control group, buried or burned. So the way this works is that Alcor, for example, I know more about this organization than the others, has standby programs. They associate with other companies that provide standby. And so let's say that you're a member and you're in the hospital and you're terminal, and the standby team will come. They will consult with the medical team and make sure they understand, that you have this set up. It's in your will, it's in your documents about your preferences. And, Alcor's intention or preference is that death be pronounced as soon as possible in the dying process. So death is to some degree an interpretation. I mean, maybe at one time the heartbeat stopped and people thought you were dead, and now it's a flat line and so on. So I've had actually a doctor to tell me that, Calvin, we don't talk about this in public, but the truth is that there is a period of time there, kind of a gray area, if you will, when someone, quote unquote, dies, when we can pronounce death or with wait a few minutes, whatever. So, if the doctor, I guess, is in a hurry, needs to get down the hall to the next patient, then death might be pronounced a few minutes earlier than maybe it would be, something like that. Anyway, the goal of Alcor, of course, is to have legal death pronounced as early as possible, because the goal is to move into the preservation process and preserve the brain with as much integrity as possible. And so there is a cooling down procedure that is utilized, and then the patient is transported promptly to Scottsdale, Arizona, where the vitrification chemical process is conducted. And there are Alcor members who have some terminal illness who move to Scottsdale into a nursing facility there to be close to the lab where the vitrification process is conducted. So the focus now in CRYONICS is on preservation and preserving the brain or the whole body with as much integrity as possible, so that in the future, however long it takes, when the molecular nanotechnology, tissue engineering, or whatever technologies are available, then there is something to bring back. So I spoke at the National Convention of Alcor a number of years ago. Aubrey de Grey, who I've worked with regard to a number of projects and is involved in super longevity research, is associated with Alcor and got them to invite me. And the backstory here is that cryonics has bad press out in society, and they're viewed as sort of kooky and fringe, but there are cryonics leaders who understand that society, for better or worse, is informed by religion. And so if cryonics is going to speak into that society, rehabilitate its image, then it needs to understand that society, and it needs to understand religion. And so that's why they invited me, a religion scholar, in to speak and consult with them. So I didn't know much about cryonics and knew nothing about Alcor when I went into this lecture with them at their national meeting. And I was really curious to learn, who is it that is involved in these cryonics programs? Aging hippies who think that, who are, trying to avoid death or put death off. I was really surprised, the people who I interacted with at the conference and in the social hours. Yes, there were some aging hippies, but also a lot of people in the technical fields and professional fields, information fields, relatively young. And I was saying, why are these people interested in cryonics? And then I realized that, we've discovered America, we have been to the moon, we are exploring outer space. So death is, if you could think of it, is an unconquered frontier. It's the next frontier. Cryonics, like many of the other topics that I've talked about in this series, raises all kinds of interesting questions for society as well as for religion. The role of the body, apart from any religious consideration, who we are is we're intimately connected to our biological frame, our body. And so there are those in religion who would reject many transhumanist programs, including cryonics, because it seems to be disrespectful of the body, which is a part of or aspect of who we are. So I pushed back a bit on that, and let's just take Judaism and Christianity. Physicality is important, creation, incarnation, a new heaven and earth. We even, Christians, eat the body and blood of Jesus, for Pete's sake. However, the question is, what kind of body? And one of the early Christian writers, the Apostle Paul, spoke of resurrection, but resurrection is not mere resuscitation of a dead body. Resurrection is transformational in that Christian concept, whereas Paul talks about it as being imperishable, powerful, glorified. So I'm not suggesting at all that the ancient writers like Paul understood technology or were talking about technology or predicting anything. That's kooky to me. But what I'm saying is the Christian tradition and the Jewish tradition have theological kind of notions that can be interpreted in a way that's open to something like transformational bodies that might relate to the work of cryonics. Personhood, image of God, these are all questions that get addressed. We address them in our book, my co-authored book, Religion and the Technological Future. And something that progressive Christian thinkers are very concerned about is ethics of all of this. And for example, they're concerned that something like cryonics would be the privilege of the wealthy and powerful. And That's a concern I have, as well as many of these transhumanist programs unfold. However, I want to say that my poor students that I teach at the university could participate in this, but if you're healthy and young, you can sign up for life insurance for pennies. And so 90% of Alcor members have signed up to be preserved, and the cost is through life insurance signed over to Alcor's beneficiary. Anyway, we talk about this in a whole chapter in the book, and Alcor's website has lots of very interesting information about cryonics. And so, buried, burned, or frozen? It's up to you. Ma salama.